Welcome, everyone. Notice is hereby given of the regular meeting of the Board of Education of the Town of Westfield in the County of Union, New Jersey, at 7:30 p.m. on the evening of Tuesday, November 12th, 2019, in the boardroom of the Administration Building, 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey. The purpose of the meeting is to transact the regular business of the board and to transact any other business to come properly before the board. At the conclusion of the public meeting, the board will move to the second floor conference room to conduct a board workshop. This is to advise the general public and to instruct that it be recorded in the minutes that in compliance with Chapter 231 of the Public Laws of 1975, entitled the Open Public Meetings Act, the Westfield School Board on Thursday, November 7th, 2019, caused to be posted at the office of the Board of Education, located at 302 Elm Street, Westfield, New Jersey, and delivered to the Westfield Leader, the Star Ledger, the Westfield Library, Town Clerk of Westfield, Tap into Westfield, and Patch.com, a meeting notice setting forth the time, date, and location of this meeting. Dana, can we have a roll call?
Michael Beelan.
Here.
Kent Diamond.
Here.
Brendan Galligan.
Here.
Robert Garrison.
Here.
Brian Morrissey.
Here.
Gretchen Olig.
Here.
Tara Porto.
Here.
Peggy Astor.
Here.
Amy Root.
Here.
Gretchen, would you like to lead us in the flag salute?
Absolutely. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'm going to start tonight's announcements from the podium. More good news for our school district. For the first time in nearly a decade, the Westfield High School girls tennis team has won the sectional championships. Congratulations. The top-seeded Blue Devils defeated J.P. Stevens High School 4-1 in the NJSIAA North Jersey Section 2 Group 4 tournament on October 14th. Tonight we are pleased to have with us the girls tennis sectional champions. When I call your name, if you'd come to the podium to receive a certificate of recognition and remain here in the front for a group photo. Let's start with the seniors. Co-captain Carly Burke. Co-captain Ava Paul. Emma Karp. And Claudia Millwater. And junior Mia Fleming. Sophomores, Katie Peretz. Peyton Silverman. Natalie Zelachowski. How did I do? And she's not here after I went through that. Freshman, Sophia Montero. Freshman, Annika Vasuna. And freshman, Madison Wright. We'd also like to recognize varsity coach Matthew Varley. And also, the assistant coach, Adam Peasy, who couldn't be here for a tremendous season. I know all the hard work that goes into it, and the competition is always very tough. So you guys did a great job in representing Westfield, so I thank you. Coach, would you like to say a couple words?
Yeah, great.
And I'll leave these for the
Great.
girls.
I'll make sure I get it. All right, I just want to thank the Board of Education, Dr. Dolan, the Westfield administration, and of course, the parents for supporting us this season. 100% of the recognition tonight goes to this group of girls. They worked really hard to win the sectional title this year. I'm extremely proud of them, and I am always, it's a pleasure, and I'm very proud to coach them. Thank you. Congratulations, guys. Sure.
Let's see, do you want us to move? Would that be better, Mary Ann? Thanks.
Everybody look up here.
Which camera? All right, thank you. That was the first group of athletes where somebody wasn't holding their certificate upside down in a picture. It's a good sign.
Okay, once again, congratulations to the girls. We'll move on to other announcements. Rob, do you have any?
Yes, I do. I have one. The National Association of School Psychologists, NASP, has designated this week, November 11th through November 15th, 2019, as National School Psychology Awareness Week. The state of New Jersey also has designated the second full week in November as School Psychology Awareness Week, which falls on this week as well. Our school psychologists provide a range of services to support students' academic achievement, as well as their social and emotional well-being. Additionally, parents can find helpful resources from the NASP under Mental Health and Wellness on the Family Resources tab at www.westfieldnjk12.org.
Thanks, Rob. Tara?
We extend our congratulations to Michael Beelan and right here, Brendan Galligan and Robert Garrison, right here, and Brian Marcy and Amy Root, who won re-election to the Board of Education according to unofficial results. Official results are expected to be announced soon. We thank all 7 candidates, including Andrew Bauer and Patrick Justin Fahey, for their willingness to serve and their commitment to the community.
Thank you. Michael?
Yes, the November PTC meeting will be dedicated to brainstorming ideas and ways to reduce student stress. Ideas can be submitted prior to the meeting via email at ptc@westfieldnjk12.org. Outcomes will be shared with Dr. Dolan and the Board of Education. The meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 20th from 9:30 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. in the board meeting room at 302 Elm Street. All parents are welcome and encouraged to attend. Please RSVP, again the same email address, ptc@westfieldnjk12.org if you plan to attend. Thank you.
Thank you. Brendan?
Yes. This is a reminder that Westfield High School will host more than 150 colleges and universities at its annual College Night this Thursday, November 14th, from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. Representatives will be in the Westfield High School Varsity Gym, Gym 5, and Cafeteria B. A list of schools attending is posted on the WHS Department of Counseling Services webpage. College Night offers students and their parents the opportunity to talk one-on-one with representatives from colleges and universities from around the country.
Thanks, Brendan. Brian?
We applaud the cast and crew of this year's fall production at Edison Intermediate School. The comedy Whodunit Clue on Stage was performed before enthusiastic audiences on October 30th, November 1st, and November 2nd. Congratulations to our talented students and their play director, Michael Altman. Next up is the Roosevelt Fall production of The Outsiders, a young adult novel that is part of the 7th grade curriculum. The play's director, Kim Johnny, says the issues that the fictional characters deal with are as relevant today as they were 50 years ago. The cast will take the stage this Thursday, November 14th at 4 p.m., and on Friday and Saturday, November 15th and 16th at 7 p.m. Tickets may be purchased online at risbooktix.com, ris.booktix.com, or at the door. A special student cash discount of $5 is available for the Thursday matinee for tickets purchased at the door.
Thank you. Ken?
Thank you. Well, if you missed the clue, which the kids did an amazing job, and you can't make The Outsiders, but then definitely don't miss the Westfield High School Theater Department's production of the historical drama Radium Girls, based on the real-life story of a group of female factory workers who contracted radiation poisoning from painting watch dials during World War I and who fought a race against time for justice. The fall production will be performed in the high school auditorium on Thursday, November 21st at 4 p.m., and on Friday and Saturday, November 22nd and 23rd at 7:30 p.m. Ticket information can be found on the Westfield High School Theater Department's website. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Gretchen?
The Westfield High School Community Service Club is proud to announce its leaf raking fundraiser. This annual event brings several hardworking high school students to your yard to rake leaves on either Saturday or Sunday morning between 9 and 12 through the weekend of November 30th. There's no set price to have your yard raked, but donations are welcome and appreciated. Proceeds will go to a charitable organization. For more information or to set up a date to have your yard raked, please contact Student Leaf Raking Coordinator Karen Abaya at kmabaya22@gmail.com or Faculty Club Advisors Zorana Kuljak at zculjak@westfieldnjk12.org and Gregory Bowers at gbowers, B-O-W-E-R-S, at westfieldnjk12.org.
Thank you. Amy?
Yes. Westfield Public Schools will be closed on Thursday, November 8th, and Friday, November 9th for the Thanksgiving recess.
That's for
28th.
Sorry, 28th, what did I say?
8th.
8th, oh, too late. Missed that already. Thursday, November 28th, and Friday, November 29th for the Thanksgiving recess. Additionally, all schools will have an early dismissal on Wednesday, November 27th.
Great.
Okay, and, yeah.
Do you have anything?
I do not.
We will celebrate Washington School's recognition as a National Blue Ribbon School at our next meeting on Tuesday, December 3rd. The meeting will begin at 7:30 p.m. and will take place at Washington School, which is at 900 St. Mark's Avenue. The complete agenda will be available on the Westfield Westfield November 27th. We're having problems with those dates.
Wednesday.
Wednesday, November 27th, on the board section of the district website.
Actually, just to add to that a bit, the end of this week, Dr. Perry, the principal of Washington School, teacher Matt Cognetti, and myself will be down in Maryland for the national recognition ceremony for the schools around the country that were recognized as Blue Ribbon schools. So look forward to that.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to recognize the public for agenda items only. Agenda items only. Seeing nobody come forth to the podium, we're going to move on.
Coming up? Okay.
So Randy Warnes, 760 Boulevard. I came to the last meeting, the last board meeting, objecting to a particular questionnaire that the school had given out to students in a class that I still don't know what class it was, although Paul acknowledged that it was a questionnaire that's been going around in the school for some time now, so it's out there, and I suppose you know who might be or what classes it may be for. So that was one thing. That's a one-off item. And so having then read the agenda for this meeting, I came across a class that is titled Power, Privilege, power, privilege, and imbalance in American society. And, my concern the last meeting was that the questionnaire that I was objecting to was designed in a way to divide people. If that is a one-off item to divide people, this is an entire agenda to divide people. And, I guess maybe I should start by putting it out to the board. What is the purpose of this class?
So I guess you can decide, since that's under curriculum, we can wait till we get to curriculum and talk about it then, because I believe that was planned, that was planned anyway. So we can certainly address it at that point.
Okay.
It's up to
I don't know the
I mean,
board
we can talk
agenda.
about
It's
it
an
now.
agenda
I mean,
item.
I think it would be best if we wait to present it at curriculum so that we have the opportunity to present the thoughts and all, because a lot of time and effort went into that class. So
Okay.
I would like you and everybody else in the audience to be able to hear the specifics of what's in the class and so forth. And then we can probably be able to comment on it a little bit better. So,
Okay, so
That's okay.
that's an item that we're gonna get to then.
yes.
Oh, definitely.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right.
Mhm.
I'll
Great.
wait.
Thank you. Dr. Nolan, anybody else on an agenda item? Besides that, if we're going to discuss it after curriculum? Dr. Dolan, I believe you have a superintendent's report.
I do. So in New Jersey, all public schools are monitored by the state, by the New Jersey Department of Education. The name of the monitoring system is an intriguing one. It's called NJQSAC. NJQSAC, that stands for the Quality Single Accountability Continuum. Just want to make it clear, I did not come up with that acronym or title. But that is the system for monitoring all the public schools in New Jersey. So as you can imagine, because this is a state organization, there's a lot of documentation that's required. So we started preparing the documents, getting them ready, proving what we have done according to law and code over the summer. And then we brought together a district committee, as required by the Department of Education, to review what we had compiled. There are binders and stacks and uploaded files, et cetera. And we reviewed that with a committee with representatives on November 1st. Tonight, we're bringing it to the board for approval. That approval is required so that I can then submit the documents and the required uploaded files to the county superintendent's office. He and his office then have a number of months to review all the documentation, not just for Westfield, but for other districts as well. And then they actually come to our district to visit the district in the springtime in March. And then the county superintendent will present his recommendations to the commissioner, who will finally have the approval of the State Board of Education and determine how we're doing on a number of factors. Okay? So there are 5 key components of this monitoring system. Not surprisingly, the first one is instruction and programs. Very importantly, the second one is fiscal management. The third one is governance, mainly talking about the people who do volunteer and are elected to the Board of Education, making sure that we're following all the requirements. There's operations, and the fifth one is personnel. So tonight, it was definitely a team effort getting all of this put together, so I'm going to ask a few people to talk about different aspects of this. The first one is instruction and programs. I'm going to ask Paul Panera, the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum and Instruction and Programs, to tell us just a little bit about that section.
Good evening. Does anybody know what it was called before CUSAC? Now I show my age. It was QAR, which is even worse. Remember QAR?
That does sound worse.
QAR. Although when we got CUSAC, it didn't sound all that much better. But so, yeah, curriculum is, of course, it's the wheelhouse of my world. So it's the most important. That's why it's first. And it's all the same. But so in the indicators that we presented to the committee last week in the community, many are performance-based. So they're based on standards that are reflected in the standardized tests. So when it comes to student performance, the high school graduation number, excuse me, Dr. Dolan reported out on a few weeks ago in a different report. Things like attendance and analysis of data, that all comes out really in student performance on testing for the most part. So there's a formula for that, and then we get a score for that where we did do well. The curriculum piece is the one I can talk to more than just saying that the standardized testing report that we had done a few weeks back, that's where the other indicators come in. But when it comes to the curriculum, how that's evaluated is based on the fact that the state issues certain elements that have to be in all curriculum. Now, we have about, as SIP will tell you, we have about 250 or more curriculum documents, and that goes on a 5-year cycle. And whenever the state introduces either new standards or new aspects of the law that should be reflected through the standards in the documents, then we have to add that to our revision process. So what that looks like is when a curriculum is either introduced new or a revised curriculum, it goes to a council of teachers and principals, administrators, who vet it to make sure that it's aligned with the standards, which is pretty much the number one thing that the state looks for and hopes for in a document. But in addition to executing the standards by being aligned in the document, other elements that are reflected in the curriculum that CUSAC will look for, the state will look for, include pacing guides, objectives, instructional strategies, the way we assess, that there is built in some concept of modifications and accommodations for students, for teachers to use as a guideline. So when they do visit later in 2020, when folks come on site to visit, that's what they'll look through in our document. So I was happy to present those to the committee that met, and we seem like we're in really good shape for that. As I said, we go through a vetting process that starts with instructional council, it goes through the board's SIP committee, and then it comes back to the board for approval. So I think that's probably all you need to know about that.
I think that's a good summary, yeah.
Okay.
The second section is fiscal, so I'll ask Dana Sullivan, the business administrator, to speak to that.
So the first item under fiscal management is budget planning. So the state will look at a number of different documents that we submit, and they're ensuring that we comply with all state regulations as far as budgeting and account codes, and of course, meeting all the required timelines and public advertisement and other requirements that we have for budget planning. Financial and budgetary control, we are required to follow generally accepted accounting principles, so that is, the state will look at many documents to ensure that we do comply with that. They will also make sure that we comply with all purchasing laws, and there's all kinds of other laws that we have to comply with, and that's part of what they review when they review our financial documents. Every year, we're required to have an audit done by an independent auditing firm. The board approves a firm every year. They are currently in the process of completing our audit of the 18-19 school year. So that audit starts usually in August, and they're actually still completing the work, on-site work. So it's a comprehensive audit, and the state will look at their report and evaluate us based on their report. We have a number of grants that we receive from most of them are from the federal government, the larger ones that flow through the state. They will ensure that we file all of our applications and final reports, expenditure reports on a timely basis, also that we submit for reimbursement on a timely basis, and that the way that we've spent the money is in compliance with the requirements of the grant and how we said we would spend the money. And the last part under fiscal management are the review of the district facilities. We submit to them a checklist that we go through of our buildings very carefully and check off boxes for different various items in the buildings to show that we are complying with building codes and safety requirements. And the state, when they come in and do our review, they will actually go to a number of schools and go room by room and make sure that our checklists are correct in the way that we've completed them.
Okay, thank you. The next section is governance. So the first part of that, very important, is we have to keep the policies that are required or that the board offers to do. We have to keep them up to date. We have had a very good working policy committee group that takes it seriously, really reviews them carefully, asks good questions, and makes sure that we're current with law and code. Additionally, we have to the state wants us to make sure that the board is following the practices that, for example, all personnel changes, so whether a teacher is going to be appointed or someone's going to be transferred, all of those, the recommendations have to come from me, but the votes have to come from the board members. And so they check to make sure that that's being followed. Ethics compliance, there is a code of ethics for board members. We review that every single year. And the board members take that seriously, that they need to follow what is expected of them. They do have I would say, a role of honor in the town, and I think people hold that pretty seriously. Budget priorities. So there's a whole budget process with a calendar that is reviewed by the Finance Committee and also with the full board, and then we take it through the year to make sure as the budget is being developed that it addresses our academic priorities. Board training is really important. I think just about every board member I have ever known, when you get on a board, it's a different role than you've had. No matter what your background is, no matter what your experiences are, being a board member is different again. So that training is really important. In New Jersey, I think we're fortunate we have New Jersey School Boards Association, and they're some of the people who provide training for board members. For annual evaluation process, at the end of each school year, the board members are asked to evaluate how they've been working, how that's been, how their work has been, what needs to be worked on differently, and they also are the ones responsible for my evaluation, and there's a deadline for when that has to be submitted. So they will, the state will be interested in checking all of that. Moving on to operations, as you might imagine, the state likes data, there's no doubt. So they will, we have a person who's in charge of organizing all of our data and working with everyone to have the right submissions and make sure that they're done on time. And we have a very good person who does that, luckily. Student conduct and discipline. Every year, we take this very seriously, our student code of conduct. Every year, it's reviewed by a committee with representatives from the community, both those who work in the schools, those who live in the town, those who are sending their children, and some of the students are on that as well each year. We look and see what has changed and what we might need to adapt on that code of conduct. All of the administrators in the district know that this is the code of conduct that is used. There are slight changes, by the way, between elementary schools and secondary schools. And that information is then shared with parents in a number of ways. It certainly is on the website, but additionally, on the parent portal before the school year begins, every year the parents have access to that code of conduct and have to acknowledge that they have read and reviewed that code of conduct. Additionally, it is on the calendar that we still send home to parents. The code of conduct is also shared with students in various ways at various grades to make sure they have an understanding. And when students do something against the code of conduct, the administrators actually pull out the code of conduct and point to it so that both students and parents understand why a given discipline or consequence is given. School safety and security. The state wants to make sure we are doing all the drills that are required, that we report on any incidents of violence, vandalism, substance abuse, or harassment, intimidation, or bullying. And I know I presented one of those reports either last meeting or the meeting before. We do that regularly. Also making sure that in every school there's a school improvement panel, also called SKIP, and SKIP looks to see what they need to do differently to try to help improve the climate. That's not something that's ever fixed. That's something that needs to be worked on and constantly measured, adjusted, and try to make improvements going forward. Student health and attendance was just last meeting where we presented the school nursing plan for this year, making sure that all students have received the health services that they require. Equity plan is always kept up to date. It includes procedures for both making sure we're equitable in hiring, but also equitable working with the students in all of our schools. Memorandum of agreement with law enforcement, that's annual, and it is done in cooperation with our local police department, and also the county office is involved in that. So that's something that we take very seriously. It's very handy when something does happen that we have one document that we can reference and we know what the requirements are for any incident. The next section is personnel. Barbara Ball, who is the head of our human resources, will talk to that.
Although we have more than 1,000 employees in this district, CUSAC particularly focuses on those who have certificates. So that's our 597 teachers and our 31 administrators. And in our personnel files and online, what CUSAC wants to see is that we have all certificates up to date and that we are in full compliance with everyone teaching exactly what they're supposed to be teaching and administering and supervising exactly that as well. We are indeed compliant on that. It goes further that they would like to see job descriptions, see that they are all current and that the certificates fit with the job descriptions as well, and we're compliant in that area. The second area, a very important one, is the evaluation of staff. And now, more than 5 years ago, the board adopted the Marshall Evaluation Program, which asks for frequent observations and needs documentation for all of that. So we have at least 6 to 8 observations apparent and ready for CUSAC to see. The same for administrators, whether they are non-tenured or tenured. So we are compliant in that area as well. District mentoring is for those teachers who are brand new to the field. And this year, we have 7 of them. They are novice teachers. They have never taught before. So the state says they need close monitoring and support. And they ask for it in greater detail than they've ever asked before. So we guarantee that we inboard these new staff members as well as all the others with a full orientation and indoctrination program. And then that they are mentored a minimum of 4 hours a month with a mentor who is a tenured teacher and someone who has an effective or highly effective rating in the district. The last one is professional development, and Paul and I share those responsibilities. And it really is endemic to our culture that professional development is everywhere. It starts with new teachers when they are brought in. We stay with them and provide them professional development, not for the required 1 year, as the state asks, but for 2 full years. Professional development happens for teachers in so many different capacities. The formal in-service days twice a year, but in faculty meetings and department meetings and small learning groups called PLCs that you may or may not see, and yet they're going on in great depth. Where you, the board, sees it is at every board meeting you are approving conferences. And there are over 100 teachers tonight who are being approved to go to different conferences in the next month or so. Administrators and supervisors also have professional development here in this room this morning. We had 2 hours of legal training from David Nash of FEA, and we take it very seriously that it truly is part of our culture, and we want to make it available to people at all times.
Thank you.
Can I ask Barbara a question before she says that?
Mhm.
One of the things I'm curious about is I know that, so the state has expectations, standards, I don't know what the appropriate word is, and about professional development and district mentoring, but I know that we have the New Teacher Institute, I know that the PLCs that we create, are those sort of unique to Westfield, or is that sort of a state, does it come from the top down, or is it something that Westfield's created that's unique to us and that you would see in other districts?
It definitely starts with the state. They have minimum requirements, which say, for example, with professional development for novice teachers, that they need X amount of topics that are put in front of them and really explored in depth. But what we do is take it broader, deeper, and more often. And one of the ways that you've really helped us with is you've endorsed the idea that we can take new teachers and deepen their knowledge by giving them a day where they can have a substitute in their classroom and they can go with their mentor to observe other teachers who have specific skills that might help them grow as a teacher. So that's where we go beyond it. The same with PLCs, there are some minimum requirements, but people really enjoy the chance to get together and explore a topic and do it far more frequently than what we're required. Brendan.
Barbara, you said we have 7 novice teachers this year. Does that include teachers that are in a non-tenure track or a long-term sub that now are hired, or those that start as a paraprofessional and work their way up? Or are they brand new graduates that have never taught?
They could come to us in any number of ways. What it means is they only have a provisional certificate,
Okay.
and that is given them for the first 2 years that they are in the field. And so they need more attention, and it can be someone who's been a para and who applied for a job because he or she has a teaching certificate and became the person who was right for the job, and then they become like any other person that we're bringing on board as a new teacher.
Fantastic. So they don't fall through the cracks.
They do not.
Thank you. So as I think I mentioned before, the New Jersey Department of Education also tells us who they want on a committee to review in more detail than you just heard, to review all of the information that we're required to submit. So I want to thank everybody who took the time to serve on that committee this year. And then if the board does approve, under finance, I ask that you approve the submission of the document for CUSAC. The scores as of now, as we self-assess, have instruction and program for 91%, and fiscal management 100%, governance 100%, operations 100%, and personnel 100%. I would like to point out that the 4 bottom categories, it really, what they are checking are the adults doing the correct submissions, the correct paperwork, following the right rules. The top instruction and program, we might write all the curriculum well, but part of that score includes the scores of all of our students, right? And students who may be brand new to our country, students who might have significant needs, it includes all of that information. So there's nobody who's looking for 100% in that. And you can't quite compare it to the other categories because, again, the other categories, they're looking for, did you follow the rules? In this category, we're looking for, how is everyone doing? Not only what their scores are, how is their growth from year to year? So it's good. It's very good, actually. Our students are doing quite well, no matter who you look at. But we haven't figured out a way to reach perfection with that yet, so we'll continue to work on that.
How does that compare to other districts?
We actually did check that today. We thought someone might ask that, so. So Paul actually checked that out, and we're doing just fine. We compared it with like districts, and there is no one who's going to reach perfection with that. You try every day as an educator, but you don't reach perfection with that.
And did we have a score from the last time we did CUSAC?
It was a different system back
Okay.
then. Yeah, so we had a score, but it wouldn't be comparable, honestly. And again, once the county checks all this information, asks us questions, we may end up with different scores, and you'll know that when we get to the end of the school year.
And how often are we evaluating this?
At this point, it's every 3 years.
Great.
It changes sometimes, but right now it's every 3 years.
I believe a couple years ago, there was talks of if districts meet certain thresholds, say 90%, I forget what the number they were using, they get to skip a cycle and do
Yes.
it every 6. Has there been any movement on that?
Not recently. You're right, that had been the case. That had been the case, but now they're saying every 3 years.
And when the results are posted, it'll be posted for the whole state. You'll be able to see.
So what they do is, I didn't explain this before, what they do is, they don't, like this year, they're not monitoring every single district. They do approximately a third every year. So all of those will be presented to the state board, and those results are released, and they're also posted on each individual district's webpage.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? No? Perfect. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Dolan. I know it took you and your committee a long time to put that all together, and we do appreciate all the work that you put into it.
Thank you.
Okay. I'd like the board to approve the minutes of the board meeting held on October 29th, 2019. All in favor?
Second. Aye.
Oh, second?
Second.
Yep.
Kent, all in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
One abstention. Okay. Personnel, Amy.
Yep, I'd like the board to consider personnel items 1 through 14. Could I have a second? Thank you, Rob. I don't think we're calling any in particular out. If there's no questions or comments, we'll do a vote.
Michael Beelan,
Yes.
Kent Diamond,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Robert Garrison,
Yes.
Brian Morrissey,
Yes.
Gretchen Olig. Yes. Tara Porto,
Yes.
Peggy Oster,
Yes.
Amy Root.
Yes.
Thank you. Facilities, Gretchen.
So there's nothing for us to vote on tonight. The Facilities Committee met last, was it Thursday?
It was
Thursday. And we we were lucky enough, because there are no students in the buildings, to have a tour of the 2 middle schools and the high school and some of the updates that have been made over the summer. And we got to, they're probably never gonna let us back in though, because we like pointing out little things, oh, there's a little chip in the paint. But no, everything looked amazing, and Mike Morrison, the new facilities director, came with us, and so it was great. It was good for us to get access and see some of the administrators. We also, Dana gave us an update on her, she has been the board's representative on the town's park and rec strategic plan, which is I guess, separate from the master plan.
Correct.
And so I think that I will have more to report on that after the next Recreation Commission meeting, which is December, that first Monday in December. But apparently there's some recommendations of some efforts between the town and the schools to further improve our fields, and so I should have more information on that then. And I don't know when our next meeting is, Dana.
Sure, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but I'll let you know. Dana will let you know in advance. But does anybody have any questions? I think that was the gist of our meeting for the most part.
December 6th is the next meeting.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Gretchen. Long-range planning, Amy.
I have no report tonight.
Okay. Policies, Brendan.
Yes, I asked the board to approve policy items number 1 and 2.
Second.
Thank you, Ken. I want to call out item number 1. We are changing the calendar for the 2020-2021 school year. Specifically, we're closing school on Election Day. We've been trying to figure out how to make this work for a couple of years now. And we were able to move a professional development day and parent-teacher conferences so that all schools will be closed. The general election next year, we anticipate higher than average voter turnout, and it's best to keep those worlds separate as best we can.
Can you go over how that week, because that week is a very
Oh,
odd
yes,
week
yes.
with
My favorite
half
part
days.
of the whole week.
I actually have a question about that.
The reason we haven't closed earlier in prior years is the NJEA convention is that same week. So unfortunately, we're going to be open Monday, closed Tuesday, open Wednesday with a half day for the elementary schools, and then closed Thursday and Friday.
So my question is, I just know that my nieces in a surrounding district and my stepson
Mhm.
are closed that whole week. It happened this year, it'll happen next year. I'm just wondering what our rationale is that we're not doing that and the other towns seem to be doing that. Is that just something we have to?
It's something we
Figured
discussed.
out?
It's finding 2 more days on the calendar without pushing us before Labor Day or pushing graduation further back.
Maybe something to consider.
To consider going forward, absolutely. Assuming we have to continue.
It seems like, it's a day and a half now,
Mhm.
so, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think other districts also do a lot more half-days than we do,
Yeah.
sprinkled throughout October and November.
Mhm.
And I think in years gone by, we had something similar as well, and there was an effort to sort of consolidate some of the half-days into a single week. But, we made a change back then. We can make a change going forward if we see how it goes.
Yeah, there is a law being pushed through the legislature in this lame duck session to force us to close next year anyway.
For the whole week?
Yeah.
No.
No,
Just
for election.
Just for Tuesday.
Oh, okay.
For Election Day. I would hope that would be paired with asking the NJEA to move their convention to a different week, even if it means swapping with another association that uses the convention center in the same, in the fall. NJSBA, for instance, uses it in the middle of October. If the 2 groups work together, they could probably figure something out there.
Brendan, if I can ask, was there any discussion on the June primary as well?
We did discuss it. Voter turnout's much lower there, and we're hoping that the county will allow us to further consolidate down to at least do the 2 middle schools where the gyms are separate.
Okay. Because in a year like this, where you had a 27% turnout, the primary next year will probably be a 40, maybe 30-40% turnout, so it'd be even greater than this year's general election, which is low, and it's traditionally the lowest point
Right,
of a
and
4-year cycle.
for the general election next year, I imagine 75% turnout isn't unreasonable. We had 70 3 years ago.
And I just want to add, I really appreciate the help from the Westfield Police Department. On Election Day, they had 2 police officers in each of the buildings that were used as polling sites, and we were really paying attention, so we appreciate that.
Yeah. And I'd like to thank the WEA for working with us on moving professional development days.
Yes.
So having been on the policies committee for, I don't know, for very many years and looked at the calendar, I just want to emphasize that the balance of days off, when, you know, respecting sort of what have become cultural, you know, trademarks of our district in terms of when we start, when we ask staff to come back, and then also recognizing that a lot of families who have kids who go away to camp don't like the year to end after a certain date, and the certainty of a graduation date for our graduating seniors. And also wanting to make sure we get our staff development days, it's a lot of balls in the air to juggle. And so, I mean, I think absolutely this is the right decision to do. And the best solution would, of course, be if we were able to just get voting out of our schools altogether, so then we wouldn't have to have this conversation every year. But I think that this is sort of where we are. To the extent the elections are going to stay in the school, we're going to have to start doing this sort of juggling a little bit more to reflect, you know,
Yeah, this is the least disruptive of
Right.
the calendar options we looked at. We looked at 3 and then modified those 3 in the policies committee to try and come up with something that was the least disruptive to not just our students, but the families that plan vacations, as well as our staff. Nobody wants to come back in the last week in August. Nobody wants to stay here till June 30th.
And just to be clear, schools can't say no to having the schools used as a polling place. That's not an option for schools in the state.
Did you mention which day we're gonna be open?
Oh, that's the other key part. We're closed Tuesday, November 3rd, and then we're going to be open February 12th, the Friday before President's Day.
So that becomes
It becomes a 3-day
3
weekend instead
days.
of a
a
4-day.
3-day
4-day.
instead of a 4-day weekend.
Yes,
And that's February of 2021.
correct.
Okay.
And this is because this is happening a year from now, we can't move graduation easily
Right.
without disrupting a lot of other plans that people have had in the works.
I mean, the fall is a very difficult time. I mean, even if you took off that whole week and you take off 3 days at Thanksgiving, you're almost down to no days left in November for instruction. I mean, so.
You add in
I think-
Columbus Day and a couple other holidays, and
Right, it's a very difficult
you'd
time to.
you'd be opening for like 10 days in all of November.
And it definitely disrupts the continuity of instruction, so you try to keep that as much as you can.
Which is why I push back on closing for Election Day for as long as possible.
Mhm.
You won me over, finally.
Well, thank you, Brendan.
Yeah. Any other questions? Dana?
Mike Beelan,
Yes.
Kent Diamond,
Yes.
Brendan Galligan,
Yes.
Robert Garrison,
Yes.
Ryan Morrissey,
Yes.
Gretchen Olich,
Yes.
Tara Porto,
Yes.
Peggy Oster,
Yes.
Amy Root.
Yes.
So Dr. Dolan, now that we've made this, will we be blasting it out? Because we know parents are already planning for next November's week's vacation.
Well, that is true. You'd be surprised how many people call my office and they have plans for 2 years from now. I don't understand it personally, but I'm impressed by it. We will. We'll let people know that this has been approved for first reading, and then let them know about that, and then after second reading, absolutely, we'll make sure parents know.
And we should, when we go to our respective liaison meetings, PTO meetings, we should make sure that this is one of the things we point out to them too.
Thanks, Brendan.
That's just for next year only, right? The following school year hasn't been decided yet.
That's correct. We'll be
Correct.
looking at that soon in
Mhm.
policies,
Yep.
but not yet.
Let's hope they make some changes someplace else
Yeah.
too. Did you do both of you?
Yeah, I did them all as
Okay,
one vote.
okay, great. Curriculum, Amy.
Yes, I would like the board to consider curriculum items 1 through 4. Can I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Brendan. Okay. So item 1, standard list of field trips. Item 2, which we'll discuss in just a moment, let me just tell you what we're considering here. First reading on the following curriculum. One we've heard some questions about, and we'll get to that in a second. Power, privilege, and imbalance in America. Also curriculum documents for dance curriculum that we have not had previously in that form. Item 3 is to approve for second reading curriculum items that we discussed at our last meeting. And all of these in item 2 and in item 3 were discussed at our last curriculum meeting, October 24th, I believe it was. But the social studies and the visual arts we're reviewing for the first time tonight. So item 3, 4 high school language arts classes, and 3 items that are elementary visual and performing arts, and then the volunteer student teacher candidate. Just to explain a little bit more about the social studies elective class, Power, Privilege, and Imbalance in America. It is a semester-long elective class for 11th and 12th graders at the high school that we're considering offering once approved by the board. It came about because of, in the cycle of reviewing all of our classes on a 5-year cycle, there had previously been a class taught at the high school that was an African American Studies class. And it was taught by a beloved teacher, and when he was no longer available to teach the class, there was some hesitation about taking it on and trying to fill those shoes. So there was a little bit of time spent considering what might be done a little bit differently and giving the material a fresher look. So there's been a lot of discussion among the social studies teachers. The social studies administrator came to SIP and reviewed it with us in September, I think it was, Paul, wasn't it? Yeah. As well. And we had previously in our 2018 iteration of curriculum instruction and programs had heard kind of a preview of the class, thought it was very interesting. And Andrea Brennan, the social studies supervisor, actually came and spoke to the board at that time in June, I think it was, of 2018. And it sounded like an interesting class, but they weren't ready to introduce it quite yet, but they are ready to do it now. And it is an interesting and thought-provoking class. It is designed for more mature students, 11th and 12th grade students, to discuss. I guess the idea is, what's the purpose of the class? The purpose of the class is to educate and foster discussion among students about the history of minority groups in America. African Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, and Hispanic Americans, thank you. And so it is a newer approach than some of our more standard social studies classes, which follow, I guess, more of a prescribed format. This one is one that we've developed in Westfield. I didn't come about in a vacuum. I know Andrea Brennan and the teachers that are involved in wanting to teach the class have done a lot of research on this. They're very current in topics that affect the students here, and I have a high degree of comfort that this is the right circumstance and setting for this type of discussion with students. We did discuss among ourselves this idea of there certainly is a lot of unhelpful discussion that goes on social media about topics that can be a little difficult. And as Andrea said when she explained it to us, discussing issues of race and inequity and what structures of government may have had to do with oppression and lingering imbalances among groups of people are something that I think it's a very good thing that we have teachers who are involved who want to curate those discussions in a controlled format. And so this is certainly a class that may not appeal to everyone, but we think that there may be the right group of juniors and seniors who would like to take it on. And we had really good conversations at our last curriculum meeting. We've had some side conversations among ourselves as well. But I know that not everyone agrees that this is right for the school. So if any of you have questions or comments.
Yeah, I appreciate that recap, and it gives a little more insight. I wasn't a part of the SIP committee before
Sure.
September, so I didn't get that preview information. So for me, this just came as a new item. And the way it's positioned and the way it's named, And also the reading materials did jar me. And I have to be honest that I felt like there was a lot of opinion in here. The reading materials in particular, when I started to dive into them a little bit, there are a lot of mixed reviews about them, talking about that they are biased, that they promote a liberal ideology. So for me, the way the class is set up, structured, and described here, I'm not comfortable with it. So that's my 2 cents on it.
And you had said earlier that it was the word privilege in particular that caught your eye.
Well, that caught my eye initially, which triggered me to dive really deep into this and to really read how it's positioned, how it's presented, and what the students are being required to read. Some of the books are, clearly anti-Trump. They are talking about, white supremacy knocking on the White House door is a quote about one of the books. I mean, on the cover, it's extremely controversial material, and I think that the way it's currently set up and positioned would lead a student, in my opinion, to a certain place that I don't feel is neutral. And when I looked at the New Jersey standards to see what these were aligned with, I also didn't really feel like they matched.
So is it the reading materials that you have an issue with, or is it the course itself, do you feel?
The reading materials would be my first concern, because there wasn't anything in there with an opposing point of view, and everything was leaning a certain way. And then the way the opening is positioned concerns me. It puts the minority groups into buckets, like especially the last line, it says that the students need to understand the minority experience for each group. And every Hispanic does not have the same experience in our country. So it's bucketing everybody. And then on page 2, if you just take a look at A through G, some of the comments about what the students are expected to do about white supremacy and about how American society has been structured to oppress all of these groups. I just don't know if that's something that the public school should be asking of our students.
I would agree with you if it were a mandatory course, but this is something in addition to the graduation requirements for social studies, for students that are interested in not just reinforcing their views, but maybe refining them from what they would find on Facebook or whatever kids are using these days. I don't even know. But
It's not
narrowing.
Facebook.
It's still Facebook?
No, it's not.
It's not Facebook.
Oh, well, there you go.
Right.
But narrowing, refining them and actually becoming educated about the positions that they may hold already.
Are we able to hear from any of the parents? I know they wanted to talk about agenda items only earlier, but we pushed it to now. Are we able to hear from the parents right now?
Yeah, of course.
Hear their thoughts?
I don't know if any of the board members want to.
I just want to.
Yeah, let's give the board a
Okay.
chance first, and then we'll
Yeah,
open it
That's
up.
fine.
Just one question, programmatically. Is it one section the first year, or are we gonna open it, see what the interest looks like, and then decide how many sections we're gonna have?
I think generally speaking, we wait to see what the interest is, and that helps us build the schedule.
Okay, and if there, say we have enough for 2.5 sections, and we're gonna drop it down to 2 for scheduling purposes, how would students be chosen? Would it go to seniors first, or based on just logistics, or?
I believe it would probably go to seniors first, but it's always just a little more complicated with the schedule.
Mhm.
Depends on what other singleton they have or something like that, yeah.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
probably it would go to seniors first, because that would be their only option.
You mean scheduling 2,000 kids is a little bit of a challenge?
A little bit.
Mhm. But I know when our supervisors come speak at our SIP meetings, they tend to talk about how many teachers and therefore how many sections in total of their subject can be taught at the high school. So
Right.
that tends to be our starting position. So if it were wildly popular, there might be a discussion among Paul and the social studies administrator, supervisor, as to, how do we want to go this first year?
Right. Well, and there's only so many social studies electives, so if kids are taking this, they're not taking something else, most likely.
Most likely.
So there will be some flexibility there.
And it is possible that, we may be having a big discussion about a class that kids don't find as interesting as we do. There have been classes that have been in the course of study that kids have signed up for, there hasn't been critical mass enough to warrant even one section of a class. So
Mhm.
theoretically, it's possible that that could happen as well.
Particularly when it gets to the higher level advanced and honors.
Yeah. Any other board members?
I just want to make a
Yeah.
brief comment. I sat through both of the subcommittee meetings, and I wanted to commend the department, Emily Brennan, and the teachers that were involved in coming up with a class like this. I think it's time to have these type of discussions to allow for students to pick an elective class such as this that gives them an understanding of history that's different than what's been presented for 100+ years. And this certainly does that. And when you look at the 15 sections, when you look at the description of each of those areas, and then when you look up the books, the reading materials, the articles that are part of the curriculum, I think it's such a wealth of information, and it does achieve, I think it will achieve the purpose and the target, which is to put forward a discussion that really hasn't happened in most of New Jersey, most of the United States, and not Westfield. So I commend the department for this class.
Sure, let me just tell you some of my thoughts, because when it first came in through email, I didn't see the description, so I had requested it, and Paul had sent the description to me, and I was able to actually go and fully read what the description was. And when I look at I just pulled out two random sections, section E and F of the course description. And E, for example, says, within American society, identify the intersectionality between race and class in America. And I think that's actually good in the sense that, like, we're not specifically focusing in on a particular race, and we're talking about race in general. But then when I look at F, for example, when we say explain how American society has been structured to suppress African Americans, Native Americans, Hispanic Americans, and Asian Americans, you know, I think we have to look at it from all angles, and we have to look at, like, you know, there are many successful people in all of those areas, and there are people who are Caucasian who have been suppressed in some way. And I think each mode is not the right word. Each race has had suppression in some way. And it just seems like when we combine that with the title of the course, where we see that privilege, and we automatically, being blunt, we relate it to white privilege. I think we might need to look at this and just tweak maybe some of the words that we're using and see if we can express it so it provides a more general view of race in America and how we're going to research the races within America.
Just to give you a little context, we did have that discussion with Andrea Brennan there in the class, and in our committee meeting, and she said they had a number of discussions about what to call the class, and they do know that privilege is a bit of a word that kind of gets people to say, oh, wait, what are we talking about here? And she feels that that's a good thing. She wants people to see the title of the class and know that this is going to be a class that's going to maybe have some uncomfortable conversations. But if you're not willing to face that, then this might not be the right class for you.
And may I add too, I'm sorry I said Emily instead of Andrea Brennan, my apologies. And, you know, I think it's unfortunate. I think the way society is nowadays, they're using certain words that should be welcomed and should be discussed on an educational setting, such as privilege and power. And certain folks in society are trying to use those words to prevent that exact discussion and conversation. So the idea of taking those words and now using it against the idea of having a conversation that you should be having, I think is unfair, and that's why I really do appreciate this course.
I mean, it's worth noting that we can't dictate the speech that every teacher is going to give when teaching this class. We have to, I trust our teachers to be able to have the conversation about some of the nuances to the different scenarios that the curriculum document is spelling out. To Mike's point, you know, whether it's a successful African-American business owner in the 1880s or what's going on, you know, in inner cities today, it's not the same experience, and I trust our teachers to be able to differentiate between the two.
Amy, what was the genesis for this again? We had an African American Studies course.
We
and
had
the
an
teacher
African-
is no longer here.
Right. We had an African American Studies course that was a little bit more traditional in, let's talk about key dates, key figures in American history. So I think it was a little bit more of a traditional class in that sense. And when they when the department discussed resuscitating the class, if you will, and beginning to teach it again, there's a gap here. We need to address this, and we need to figure out the right way to teach the subject. The teachers said, we'd like to dig into it a little bit more, and.
What was the gap that they noted? You said there was a gap in the course content?
When the teacher retired, the course was no longer taught.
Right.
Okay. Oh, so the teacher retired.
Well, and I think, and I would say that the gap also was in relation to being focused on one minority rather
Mhm.
than a more fulsome analysis of
Okay.
of the numbers of minorities
Exactly.
in American society, right?
Right. And that's where intersectionality comes up as well,
And I think that's where the course can be directed to, is where it doesn't just necessarily, like the previous course was focusing on the African-American community.
Mhm.
We're having a course that focuses in on both the suppression and the successes of all the various races, whether you be Asian, African-American, Hispanic, or Caucasian, and looking at them equally and saying, we have people who have been suppressed in all of these areas, but likewise, we have many successful people in these areas. And, balance the issues, and I think we might want to just tweak it somewhat.
I also think if you read down, I was on curriculum prior to this year, so I was not on the committee when this course was being finalized this year, but when it was brought to curriculum last year, first of all, I think it's a great class. As our kids get up in upper grades, we're asking them to debate issues, to bring current issues to the table. We're also looking at, from our high school students, to do a little bit of what we do in college days. It's no longer about, let me just tell you what's in the books, but rather analyze what you're doing. Have opinions, put your opinions on the table. And I do think that this class allows students who find this to be their specialty, if it's history and social studies and government and so forth, to be in a class where they can have these discussions and debate issues. So I think it's a great class. What you're saying is it has to show both sides. It has to show the oppression, plus also the success. And if you go to H, it says assess the legacy of African American, Native American, so forth, and culture, and analyze the impact these cultures have had on the development of American history and society. I'm going to assume that is going to discuss the success stories of the different racial groups and so forth. So I think there are both sides of this. If you can't just take out E and say, I don't like E because E ties to F.
Well, and the reality is, why are we trying to soften this in any way? Because the successes are even more remarkable given the oppression. So we shouldn't try and soften the fact of the oppression by lumping in the successes as well. That's not what this class is aimed or intended to do.
I don't disagree with what Rob said, or what you said, or what you said about why this class is important.
Okay.
Or that the students should have the opportunity to have these mature discussions, or any of that. My issue is that it's all being presented in a political way, in a skewed political way. If you look at the materials that the kids are being given, and you dive into the way this stuff is positioned, it's very clear that it's skewed. That's what the concern is. All of the material is great if it's balanced. I don't think it's
help me
balanced.
understand where you're seeing the political insertion. Just help me see it.
The book
I'm not
list.
trying
The
to be
book
obnoxious.
list- The book list is the biggest concern for me. The book list has books in it and only books in it, that communicate that the white man has, destroyed all these opportunities for all these ethnic groups. That's the book list is what my issue is. If we could change the book list up and reword some of this, then maybe we could have another discussion. But that's my opinion.
Well, first of all, the board finishes their discussion, and then we will
I-
open it up for public comment.
I would, I don't, we can always talk again after we hear public comments, right? Because there
But I
might
just
be
want to make
some-
sure that nobody else on the board has anything that they want to discuss prior to going into.
Is this
public
course
comments.
more, is it a history course, or are we also teaching the kids how to have healthy conversations and debates with one another with different opinions?
And develop critical thinking skills?
Yes.
Yes, that's exactly what we're trying to do with this class. It's an excellent point.
Look at
Yes.
everything from J to O on the objectives list.
No, I just wanted to call it out.
Promoted a spirit of appreciation and understanding, extend and apply research skills, demonstrate listening and public speaking, demonstrate knowledge, understanding, and practical use of media resources, and to me, the most important, evaluate solutions or possible solutions to racial and ethnic tensions. So you discuss the problem, and then you talk about possible solutions and why they may or may not work. And that's really where the critical thinking skills come in. And student opinions can really come out in discussing there's solutions where there really is no right or wrong answer, because we don't know what will work and what won't work, or else we would have done it already.
Okay, I just want to, I really do thank the board for, doing some research on this and being able to discuss this at the table. I think it's a great course. I have not looked at each piece of reading material per se, but do believe that the supervisors have looked at the research material and, that it's good research material, but, I can continue to go home. I haven't read every piece. I don't know if you've read every book and so forth. Have you?
I have not read every book. I
Okay.
have read reviews of the books. I have looked at the comments about the books. I've read a little bit of, the table of contents and the back covers of the books, and that's where I started to see what
Right,
I'm saying.
that's hard, because depending on where you're looking on the internet and so forth, the internet can be skewed also,
Okay,
so
well,
that's a
why don't we
hard
hear from some
situation.
parents and see if we can move forward.
But,
This is only the first reading, so we're going to re-review it again, correct?
well, we will vote again.
We will vote again.
We'll vote
I
again, because
believe there's
I
a
haven't looked
2-week
at the books, and I want to take a look at them and see what they
Mhm.
say.
And so just so we know, that the second reading for this will be not at the next meeting, but at the following meeting, is there a?
No, it will,
Next one.
it'll be on,
December
next
3rd,
meeting.
right?
yeah,
Okay, I just
Yeah.
didn't know, some of them
December 3rd.
have a little.
Policies
Yeah.
Okay, so I will open up the discussion for the public to come forward. Please state your name and address.
My name is Carrie Olagino. I live at 716 Oak Ave. So I was here 2 weeks ago, and then I went to the PTC meeting the following day, and Gretchen invited me, brought this to my attention, and I want to say thank you. This is exactly the type of class that we need in Westfield, okay? This should be a required part of our curriculum. The fact that this is an elective is nice, okay? Because when you're white, you don't understand your privilege, okay? I handed out that white privilege article at the PTC meeting, 35 copies the next day, okay? And what I said was that white people, 80-something% of the people that live in this town need to recognize and really check themselves about what white privilege is. Because you don't really know what it is, because nobody's talking about it, okay? And so, not having the conversation and white people thinking that this colorblind attitude is okay, isn't, okay? We don't talk about it, that means our kids can't speak up about it, they can't have an opinion about it, they can't change the way that things were, and they can't change things in the future, okay? Racism is uncomfortable. Our children in 11th and 10th grade are ready, okay? My senior is the president of the Girls Learn International Club this year. She's been on that club since 6th grade. And last winter, they did a human trafficking panel at the high school, okay? These are important issues for kids that want to pursue being in law, human rights, okay? They're not too young. They're about to go out in the world, okay? And before this type of course exists, you don't learn about this stuff unless you are minoring in history in college, okay? And that's unacceptable. There is no way of putting this nice, okay? Because for hundreds of years, there was slavery in this country, okay? And until white people stand up and say, I don't want my kids to be perpetuating racism, there is never going to be a change on the news and in our society and with our president or anybody else that is making decisions in this country, okay? So I think this is a fantastic class. I think we should put it in the curriculum as an elective, and I would personally like to see it in the future become a part of our curriculum, regular curriculum, okay? Because the reality is that there's racism in our schools because our kids don't know how to talk about it. And by the way, thank you. I'm glad that the N-word was scrubbed off of the bathrooms in the high school after I was here 2 weeks ago, okay? And what I'm gonna ask of our folks in our board and just in our schools is, I'm pretty sure that when parents have that attitude, not my kid, okay, it's unacceptable. And what I'm gonna say today is that we need to make sure that we're not saying, not my school, okay? When the gentleman, I left here upset last 2 weeks ago, but I watched this board meeting on the Vimeo, because I always do, and I was happy to see that the other 3 parents that were here that night came up and made comments like after I left. And the one gentleman mentioned that his father was a high school principal in a in a more urban area or a rougher area or something like that, and that it was the custodian's duty to go and check for graffiti on a regular basis. And what I'm saying is, let's not have that mentality, not my school, because we do need to be checking. This is happening in our schools, and we have a minority group, a small minority group. We have a lack of diversity in this town, okay? And so when you're thinking about oppression in American society, it's happening in our town. And the minorities in this town are at a significant disadvantage because they're the minority and not the majority. There isn't a way to balance it out, okay? Racism and minorities, I mean, obviously you didn't study history to a great extent in college, because if you actually read these articles and this American history, you'll realize that white people were smiling and collecting fingers, okay, as souvenirs when African Americans were getting lynched. And that wasn't that long ago, hon. It really wasn't. It was like less than a century ago, okay? So, what I want to say is that I commend you for bringing this to the curriculum. I hope that you will approve it, okay? And I'm very happy that you've brought the No Place for Hate to the district. After that, I learned that there's the gentleman that's coming to the high school on November 19th. I checked out his, it was an old presentation on YouTube, but it's gonna be fantastic, okay? He has a good message about hate speech, how we should be accepting, okay, of all differences. And this is the type of course that allows our students to talk about differences and be comfortable about it. Because when we as white people are trying to create this colorblind attitude, it's not actually helpful, because if you can't have a discussion about differences, there's no conversation. It prevents conversation because it creates discomfort. And so what I would say is, one of my questions actually was, will the literary material be fluid? Okay. I was happy to see that the privilege article was on there, because I've been participating for the past 5 weeks. This past Monday was the last week in this dialogue circles for the Anti-Racism Community Collaborative in Union County. And yeah, I think it is really hard for white people to read books like this, because nobody's been talking to us about, slavery and how things are today, because, I'll give you an example, okay? When an African American went to war, okay, and they came back, and white people were all getting the GI Bill, okay? Well, every veteran was supposed to get the GI Bill, but they weren't. okay? These are the kind of programs that need to be reinvented in the current society. You know, you probably hear about reparations or different things like this, and it doesn't have to be cash, you know, given to families. It needs to be opportunity, okay? Because the ability to grow wealth in this country has been for white people. And there have been specific, widespread, and that's why they call it systemic racism, which has prevented minorities from coming up and being able to get the same wealth that white people have in this town. Okay, that the majority of who you're seeing, okay? And so this is extremely important because we need students who are going to become adults and they're going to be productive in society. And it's not about being anti-anyone. It's about recognizing American history for what it is, accepting the discomfort in that, and if you are a human and you have humility, compassion, and you actually educate yourself, you will realize how human everyone is and how we haven't all been treated that way. And I'll be here in 2 weeks to continue discussing this. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen.
Hi, I'm Mira Mehta. I live at 41 Carroll Road, and I am actually a junior at the high school. And I guess what I want to start with is that history is actually one of my favorite subjects, and the reason why is that it's about people. It's about how they lived, the events that shaped them, and the lives they changed. And these stories are actually crucial to our understanding of the world that we live in today because we see the same patterns repeated, and the same problems that went unresolved in the past are reflected in modern challenges. But unfortunately, a lot of the history that we learn is perceived as irrelevant, and that's why so many of my classmates say that history is the least important subject, and why so many people choose not to take a history class senior year. And a class like this makes direct connections to today's society in ways that can actively engage students. Not only will it spark interest in history, it'll facilitate important discussion. Oppression and privilege are concepts that appear throughout history and determine the outcomes that people have in their lives. But in an increasingly polarized society like we see today, it's really difficult to create genuine solutions about racial issues because, like everybody said, people are talking about this with uninformed and they're having these discussions angrily on social media rather than in a productive environment. But considering various perspectives on history and current events allows for civility, unity, and understanding. The consequences of institutional racism, however, whether or not they remain in the same form today as they were when they started, are still being felt. For example, if you look at policy towards Native Americans, it dramatically reduced their populations and it inhibited the preservation of their culture. And Native Americans today are far more likely to experience health problems than their white counterparts because the reservations don't provide access to the same services. African Americans experience disproportionate rates of poverty in part due to housing discrimination, which created an unofficial segregation. There's a disproportionate number of people in color in jail despite the fact that they commit crimes at the same rate as white people. And all of these issues are important today, and without true education on them, it's going to be impossible to handle them well. And confronting racism is often seen as an affront to people of privilege, which was discussed earlier. But what's important to recognize is that having privilege doesn't mean that you don't have problems or that you are the reason that everybody else has problems. It's a recognition that the problems that you have are not amplified by your race or by your class or by whatever factor gives you privilege. And that's a really important recognition to make because it allows us to better understand our reality and how best to create a more just and equal society, because I don't think that anybody will dispute that obviously my life or your life is not the same as somebody else's life. And I understand that not everybody will view the history the same way that I do, but I spent a lot of time thinking about this issue and researching systemic oppression in the United States. I spent 100 hours for my Girl Scout Gold project working specifically on this issue. And what I learned is that there's a lot that we don't know. Because in a regular history course, there's a lot to cover and a lot of it slips through the cracks. And I think disproportionately, it's the kind of material that would be covered in this course specifically to speak to the issue of there being bias. I think this is kind of meant to compensate for the existing bias in the history that we teach now, not to create a new bias. Bias is something that's unavoidable because opinions always exist and they will somehow seep through. This is meant to even it out. And so a course like the one being considered would create a space specifically dedicated to filling these gaps by tracing the themes from the beginning of their history in the United States to their presence in modern day America. So we get really a full understanding of how that's existed over time. And if after learning all of this information, people still have different perspectives, that's a good thing. Nobody would argue that like indoctrinating people with one view of society is a good thing. What we're saying is that we need to be educated on all views of society so we can have an appropriate discussion, one that is not uneducated or biased or hateful, but one that can actually create meaningful solutions. And I think from looking at the curriculum, it looks like this course allows for really meaningful discussion where people can have these thoughts in a productive way rather than being angry about it. And that's why I think that if I could take this class, I would be really grateful for it. But thank you for listening to me.
Thank you.
That was tough to follow that, so that's for sure. My goodness. Randy Warner, 760 Boulevard. Sorry I jumped the gun before with jumping onto this. Obviously, I have an opposing viewpoint on this particular subject. So I guess the thing that I have, I guess the basis of what I object to is that, you know, fact-based history is fine and appropriate, particularly for high school students, so that they have a foundation for them to then start to think critically about very complicated issues in our society. This is an ideology. This is not, hey, you know, this happened, that happened. This is, well, doing a little bit of research on some of the terminology in this course. I forget what they called it here. I guess social justice or something like that. It breaks down society into intersectional groups, right? Gender, we talked about before, gender, race, sexual orientation, and says that all of these people are victims of entrenched power structures put in place by people like me, of course. And, you know, it sort of just puts aside the entire foundation of the country. The foundation of the country that was based on, the Declaration of Independence, based on natural rights. It doesn't mean that these things didn't happen or aren't happening. The point is that does teaching this kind of division, that these structural inequities are here and there are people oppressing you all the time, is that drawing people together? Is that creating some unity in our society, our very divided society? Or is it further dividing our society? And you're further dividing our society from kids in high school, kids that haven't lived that long, right? They haven't experienced life yet, and that's a problem. I'm not seeing what so a child leaves this class and perhaps is not a history buff, leaves this class and what are they feeling about themselves? Are they feeling better about themselves? Are they feeling better about their country? Or are they feeling worse about it? I don't see how this, listen, every one of these classes in this curriculum will say, critical thinking. Everything's critical thinking. Every class you should take, you should be thinking critically about everything. So having those as the point of a class and completely brushing over what the underlying, source material is, which is completely and utterly one-sided.
I don't
Okay.
see it there.
All right, I'll just read them. I'll read them. White privilege, origins of privilege. Well, this is a good one, vanishing middle class, which is also a problem. We don't have classes in this country. We have citizens. We don't have lawyers.
Guys,
Chill out.
The
one at a time.
videotape is gonna get messed up unless we do this in an orderly manner, so, sorry. Everyone has an opportunity to speak.
Right, well, my point here is that the terminology of class is something that we put on things to describe it, but the origin of class is that you are in a class and you cannot move. That's not what our society is based on, and that's not the aspiration of our society, even if we haven't achieved it yet. My point here is that this divides people into whatever intersectional camp they're in and says, you've been oppressed, someone's taking something away from you. Versus, listen, bring back the African American Studies class where you can, talk about the history of people in this country, what they've overcome, et cetera, and you can glorify in it. We can all glorify in it together. This tells you some people are evil, some people are good, and it's still like that today. No. You guys are going to vote however you vote. It's clearly political. You're going to vote for it because you agree with the politics of it. And I think that's sad for high school.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Donnell Carr. I live at 641 Hort Street. It's a lot of passion in the room tonight. First, I want to thank the board. I want to endorse this proposal. And I want to thank you for actually doing the work. These things require work, research, and courage. And what we need in this society right now is courage. We don't have a lot of courage. We do have a lot of taking sides. The gentleman that spoke, I sat beside. I heard you. I do believe that foundationally, though, I agree. You mentioned ideology. That's where the ideology is. Our foundation, our Constitution, what this country was built on, or is supposed to be built on, is ideological. And we've never really achieved it. And we'd like to achieve it. But I'd like to just pose, the young lady who spoke, I hope your speech is recorded. And I hope it becomes perhaps part of the syllabus of this course, because I think it's very important what you said. And I appreciate the other young lady as well. I'm one of the older persons in the room, could be the oldest one. But I've experienced a reality that most of you have not experienced. That is just a fact. You don't have to accept it as a fact, but it's a fact. There were times, and even now, I could get in my car and I'll take off and drive somewhere. I'll drive to California. And you can take off same time and drive to California. We'll probably take different routes. We'll probably stop in different places. We will avoid different spaces. It's just that we have different realities. And apparently there is an in-between. There's one reality and there is an opposite reality and there is an in-between reality. And I think I've heard all of those addressed this evening. Fact. The purpose of our schools is to educate. I think we'll all agree on that. And I think we all have an understanding pretty much of what education means. Education is about preparing minds to function in society. Our hope, our anticipation in this preparation is they will function in a good way and not a bad way. Our society, fact, I'm going to call this a fact. Education overcomes, if allowed, ignorance. And one of the things that prevails in every place, in every country, is ignorance. That's a lack of being informed, a lack of operating without all the facts. I don't want to impugn anyone. I don't want to, if you have a different opinion about what I'm saying, I'm not impugning you. I'm not really criticizing you. I'm just stating what I know to be true. Fact. Our society is fraying at the edges and in danger of falling apart because of intolerance and lack of civility. That's a fact. There is no peace. We're in a state of unrest. Now, I'm not talking about and don't want to talk about how we got here. But for instance, a young lady mentioned a few facts, but one of them is that we have in 2019, we've had more occurrences of incidents, racial incidents, religious incidents, than we've ever had in any year. I mean, maybe we could go back to the days of slavery and come up with some different statistics. But we have seen the manifestation of hatred and violent activities, actions, over and over again. That's just a fact. It seems to me that most every conceivable offense that we can come up with to oppose these things, to stop them, to stymie their growth, we should be seeking. We should be looking for ways to address these concerns. We can close our eyes and say, oh, we're living in a peaceful society, none of this is happening, but we know it. It's happening every day. One thing that really concerns me a lot, and some of my colleagues, some of my friends and family, is we know that any day in Westfield we might encounter one of these things that's happened in the country over the past few years. We know that. We need to work to keep this from happening. And one way that we keep it from happening is through the process of education. It seems to me that where we are now, our peace is being robbed. I don't know. I can't live in peace every day. Maybe you can. I can't. I wish I could tell you some of my history. I'm not going to have the time, and I will not take it. But you know, I grew up in the South. I traveled all over the country, and many, not all over, but many parts of the country, several parts of the world. I've lived long enough to say I've experienced these things. And they're not nice. It seems to me that this proposal that's before the board will play a part in addressing these issues locally. If we can seed a few minds, a few young minds to go out like the young lady and just have that message in their head and carry it on to other folks, you know, we can change this society. We can change it. It's through that process of education. The dystopic situation that we're in now is not what we want to be in. I know that. Whatever your point of view, you don't want to be in a place that you don't feel comfortable or somebody doesn't feel comfortable around you. It's not just a matter of cost versus benefit, it's not just a matter of of whether or not this particular thing that we're talking about is going to solve all the problems. We know it's not, but it might solve some of them. And that's what we're concerned about. I support Superintendent Dolan and the Board of Education in your efforts to implement educational curricula that will impact the students to make them better citizens, where they can serve, truly serve everyone, and where everyone will be comfortable and see each other as brothers and sisters. That's how I see you. When I look out, I see my brothers and sisters. I'm not a person of race. I don't believe in race. Not like that. Those are artificial terms or artificial assignments that have been placed on me and on others. And we need to get to a point where we look beyond that. Until we get to that point, we have a lot of work to do. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Aisha Qualis. I reside at 312 Livingston Street. I just want to, I'm going to make this quick. I just want to thank everyone, the board, about putting this into the curriculum if it is approved. I am a 1995 graduate of Westfield High School. I have resided in Westfield all my life, and I continue to live there with my children. I had one graduate last year. I have a 7th grader at Edison right now. With that being said, if you put, I took the African American course, history course, when it was an elective. I must say, 100% of the students in that classroom were African Americans. Yes, it provided us with a history of slavery and civil rights and stuff like that, that you can just look up and get information. But this curriculum that you guys are presenting, this is the information that I needed when I was in high school, what I needed as a 40-something-year-old adult. I wish I had all of those readings. Unfortunately, you may not like the list, but I am now going to go back to the book readings, and I'm going to read those myself. I adore the Westfield school system. They treated me very well. On some levels, I appreciate the education, but there was something missing, and this is it. You guys have no idea what it's like growing up here in Westfield as an African American. I was called the N-word in middle school, and I got into a fight. You want to know why? Because I don't think the young white girl who said it to me understood the history behind that word. I don't think people fully understand when somebody say to me, what does it matter? Your mother's on drugs. Yeah, she died from AIDS, whatever. The crack epidemic, where did that all start? There's a history behind all of that. Education is so, so important. If everybody only knew what they will learn in this class, I think it will be a game changer, not only for Westfield, but for the society as a whole. Remember, we all grow up, and eventually the young kids growing up are going to have their own families, are going to get jobs, they're going to be a part of society. And all you could do is say, if you educated them and gave them the tools to learn, they don't have to accept it, but they now know it. So I just say, thank you so much for doing it now. It's never too late to learn. Thank you.
Hi, I'll try to be brief also. My name is Claudia Cohen. I live on Mountain Avenue, 615 Mountain Avenue, and I'm thrilled that the school board, the history teachers at Westfield High have the courage to tackle an issue that's so important and yet divisive, right? I mean, we saw that in this room. I'd like to briefly talk about three things. One is, who do we need to hear from to make this decision? The second one is division, and what divides us and what brings us together. And the third one is fear. So I'll try to address those briefly. The Martin Luther King Jr. Association, which Donnell, who just spoke, was the president of for many years, as many of you know, and Liz Wolfe, sitting next to him, is the current president, about 3 years ago had a open town hall meeting at the high school, and I was privileged to be asked to co-facilitate that meeting. And it was a discussion about race. And the main theme that came out of it was that we need to find ways to talk to each other. All of the panelists and the people in the audience said, we don't know how to talk about race, and we're afraid we're going to say something stupid or awkward, so we avoid it. And we need to have more conversations. And so when we talk about who needs to be part of the conversation, Principal Nelson, who sadly is not with us anymore, as we know, shared his experience mentoring black students at the high school. And he mentored all students, but he specifically said it saddened him so much because he encouraged all students to become educators. He was so passionate about his life's work. And I should have said, I have two daughters who went through the school system, and my older daughter, who graduated in 2001, I would say probably a half dozen of her friends and colleagues now teach in the Westfield school system. They're all white. And he said that the students would listen to him in terms of going to get a degree in education. And he often promoted University of Delaware, which I think had been his alma mater. And then he asked, and will you come back and teach in Westfield? And every single black student said no, because I felt marginalized here. I didn't feel like I was fully accepted and part of this place. So I think we have to talk and hear from people of color who have a different lived experience than we do, right? I think we really need to hear, as we have started to tonight. So division. One of the division and fear. I started to kind of recognize my whiteness about 5 or 6 years ago, and as I've done more and more reading and engaged in discussion groups and so on, I come to the recognition that it's not about blaming white people. It's the culture we live in, it's the air we breathe. Many societies are structured where they're, whether it's wealth or caste, or I understand that America aspirationally doesn't believe in that. And historically, when the Chinese wanted to come, we had the Chinese Exclusion Act. When the Irish came many years ago, if you all read Little Women, you know that they threw limes at them. We've had that unfortunate history of not accepting people that were different until we did, right? And maybe that's human nature. So I don't see it about blaming white people. I see it about stepping back. It's like the water we swim in. We can't see what it's telling us, but if we stand back and see the legacy of slavery, the fact that there was slavery in New Jersey, when we look at the history of when black individuals were first elected to office in New Jersey, just so many facts that we aren't taught. And it isn't about blaming white people and saying, you took something away from me. It's saying, let's look at this society in which we live. Is it ideal? if it's not, what can we all do to make it better? So it's not about blame or being wrong or white people taking things from people of color. It's about understanding the structure that perpetuates itself and how can we together find a way to open our eyes, see what the water we swim in, and find ways to make it more equitable. And I understand the concern if they're about a political agenda, and I would hope that if there's anything in the literature that talks about elected officials, that I wouldn't think was necessary or appropriate. But talking about the structure, and you know, I won't do it, I won't say it, but just because there's so much, but all of the data that helps us understand the structural history of privilege that people who are white have is just important for us to see so that we can help all of us be our best selves. So I very much appreciate the work that you've done, and I hope that you do decide to offer this course. Thank you.
Hi, Peggy Brugg. I'm at 48 Mohawk Trail. I'm also a 1980 graduate of Westwood High School, so as Isha said, I also took this wonderful African American course. And I think what's important is for us to recognize that facts are present based on the individual who is stating the facts. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to say in a multi-ethnic, diverse country that's rapidly changing, it is imperative that we teach kids as early as we can to talk about issues as they exist from their perspective. And that's what I believe this course will do. And that's what we need this course to do, because wherever we are, we should all recognize that the makeup of America and the makeup of this world is changing, and our kids need to be prepared to deal with it and address it. And by saying, you know, the politics is one thing or the perspective is another thing, and it's not fact, it's based on your perspective. So I agree, I can honor your perspective, but you also have to honor my perspective, and this will allow us to do that.
Hello, I'm Greg Blasi, 779 Carlton Road. So I find this meeting interesting. About 2 months ago, there was a conversation about starting a No Place for Hate program in town. And I asked a few people before I came, I wanted to come and speak about it. So it was very uncomfortable talking about it. And I asked 2 people, friends of mine in town, and they were like, yeah, I would be a little worried about coming here and speaking about it as well. So I literally came in that hallway, and I waited and I never came in. So a few weeks later, I found out that the ADL was going to teach about hate, that anyone was going to teach about hate speech in schools. Which if anyone knows, which I'm so happy this young woman talked about history, if you look at the history of anyone, any country, Russia, Germany, anyone who talks about speech, you know there's going to be a problem. So I then signed my children out. I have 3 sons. One's in the Scotch Plains Sustainable Science class. 2 are here in town. And we signed them out of this class. And today, lucky for me, my son was chosen to be in one of the groups. He was picked as a leader in one of the grammar schools to teach about this class, to teach other kids. That was something that's so worrisome to me. He was actually chosen, which I think ironically, proves that my wife and I are doing a good job at home, teaching them how we should act in life and be kind and courteous to people without using limits on speech. So tonight, what I think about this, I came to speak about what I just told you. And I think what Miss Oporto, what she was saying is, she wasn't saying the class isn't important. She was talking about the books that are being chosen. So if you guys have the chance to watch history, you can watch Yale courses online. John Merriman teaches European history. You can listen to classic history, David Wetzel from Berkeley. You can listen to many, many classes about history from colleges like Yale and Berkeley for free. And they're not divisive, they're history. I was on the porch with 5 college-age kids last Saturday. I love college. I'm an architect. Architects stay up all night arguing about the things you're not supposed to. Politics and religion. That's all we argue about in architecture and art. It's hard to argue about art. There hasn't been any in the last 50 years, but that would be the argument we would have. But in that, these young people, they're not happy in college. They're constantly feeling as though every conversation they have, they're being told what to think. They're being told what to write, and they'll be punished. Now, I hear this on the news, but these are my nephews that I'm listening to, which is very interesting, the local schools. So history is the thing that America has. A famous historian you'll see on Channel 13 all the time, I think his name is Macmillan, always talk about the biggest problem with this country is we've lost a love of history. History is, whether you're going to learn about the Greeks, something Socrates always wanted is people to question everything. So why wouldn't you have a class about race? Why wouldn't you have a class about all of these things, but you have to understand both sides? You have to understand the African American experience, which I don't, but I do find it unique whoever brought up drugs. Drugs is an important thing. Drugs and cocaine in Miami is another interesting time period. But the epidemic in the Midwest right now is a white epidemic. I always say, the country that makes a lot of weapons, we're going to fight a lot of wars. The country that makes a lot of drugs, people are going to take them. We have to learn not to live with each other just for the sake of living with each other. We have to learn the histories of why things happen. If you want to know about Russia, find out what Russia was like before the revolution, during the revolution, how many people in the Ukraine, 6 to 9 million people were murdered. If you want to know what Germany was like, learn about the Weimar Republic. If you want to learn about China, find out what China was like before the revolution. See what these places were like. See why we are the way we are right now. These are very difficult times. If you listen on YouTube, everyone is talking about speech or taking away speech. People in Europe. Sir Scruton in Europe, most famous living philosopher in England right now. Jordan Peterson, Rubin, Shapiro, all these people are talking about freedom of speech and worrying about people taking it away and what history has done before when this has happened. So I hope you have this class. I hope it's not political. It's very dangerous. It's very, very dangerous. I lived in Montville, New Jersey. Growing up, I was born in Bloomfield, New Jersey, where you were either Italian or Irish, you were all Catholic, or you were a mixture of Italian and Irish. I moved to Montville, which was half Italian and half Jewish. Very small Asian population. Now it's an enormous Asian population. It shows you how places change. I went to school in Newark. My parents are from Newark. They lived blocks away from where I went to college. I drove home from NJIT at night one night. I got hit by a 13-year-old boy, hit the back of my car with a baseball bat while I was leaving. And I wasn't angry, I was sad. It was about 1 o'clock in the morning. And what I wanted to know was, why was he out on the street with a baseball bat? I drove home to Montville. I dropped my keys in my car, the door was always unlocked, and I went home. It was an amazing experience for me to have. But while I lived there, I looked around, and most of the time problems are usually an economy. Most things in this world happen because of economy. So again, I'm very worried. I'm disappointed about organizations being in our schools talking about speech. Very, very disappointed. I'm very worried. And I think that anything being politicized is not healthy. If you would just spend a little time searching on YouTube on both sides. If you look around the world, Poland's event yesterday, anti-right, alt-right event. If you look in Russia, if you look in Germany, if you know Italians, if you've been to France, the whole world is about to erupt with many problems. It's not a good time, but it could be. So that's all I have to say.
Dr. Dolan, quick question. Procedurally,
I don't think we're done yet.
oh, I just, all right. Is the curriculum document like our policies and regulations, where the reading list is a suggested document that can change without further board approval? Or would we have to go back and revise it?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to talk to you about that.
Sure.
Yeah.
There was another student who wanted to speak, so I just want to make
Yeah.
sure we get to
We'll
him.
get there.
He'll be next.
So in this particular case, these resources would be the framework, they would be used, because it's really an elective written by, two teachers, and either teacher could teach it. But because it's so specific to this topic, those would be used. If this were something like an ELA class, an English class at a high school, then you might have a selection to choose from. But these were selected really in conjunction with each objective that they were looking for. So I would say, that, yeah, this is it, yeah.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Alex Weinberg. I reside at 1003 Boynton Avenue. And I just have like a logistical question. If this course was to be approved, when would it start like being taught at Westfield High School?
In September.
This
This
upcoming
coming
school year?
Mhm.
Okay, that was it.
Okay. All right.
Efficient speaker.
And again, just to clarify, it would be up for kids to select it in their courses and to be worked into the schedule. But yes, we would anticipate that it could be taught as soon as September. Yep. Okay.
I'm Steve Christian. I live at 411 Beechwood Place. Came tonight with sort of some prepared remarks, but after everyone else spoke, I think that the issue with this class, and I've seen nods no, is the fact that it is so left-leaning in the course material. And I think that's the most important part that the board needs to look at. I mean, it's just out there. I mean, the whole base of the class is, at least from my reading of it, is the essay, White Privilege, Unpacking the Invisible Backpack. I mean, that's where it all starts from. And that's basically an essay that says, white people are automatically racist on the virtue of their being white. Because I looked at it today, and
Did you read it?
I did read it. I mean, well, that from my perspective, that's how it reads to me, and that's how. And then I also looked at the Joshua Rothman piece where he interviews her, and it's sort of like the same sort of thing. And I think the concern is that there's not a good, just this idea that I just think that it's just the idea that I just don't, I feel like white people are not out to get anyone. And that's the concern, that's what, when I looked at the materials for the course, I said, God, is this really what we're gonna teach our kids? So, I mean, I just really think that the board should take a look at the materials and consider how, you know, other factors that contribute to the problems in these communities and come up with some materials that address it, you know, separate from the race issue. You know, I wrote a couple of like fast facts that I looked at was, I talked about in what I prepared that the real privilege in society is the two-parent household, and how the poverty rate among two-parent black households is only 7%, whereas it's 22% among whites in single-parent homes. So, like, I think a valuable part of sort of this sort of discussion about how do we improve society would be talking about family and how do we restore the structure of the family, because that's the support that young people need. And I think if those sort of things were added into this curriculum, it would be...
But I think it's important to put them on the table and be able to discuss them in a way that can go point for point, and especially have open-minded listening, which is the ability to listen with the potential that your mind can be changed. Thank you.
I just want to say, I really do appreciate the debate, and I called up, at the beginning of this year, I got to speak to the teachers on the first day of school, and I just want to read a quote that means a lot to me, and it kind of leads to what happened tonight. So I said, "You learn by listening, debating, exchanging ideas, being open-minded, and recognizing the intelligence and thoughtfulness of others." And I really take that for tonight's discussion, because I learned a lot, I listened. I still have my opinions, I think, as to what it is, but I think this type of dialogue is sort of what the class is about, a little bit, so that people can get together with ideas. So that was just my summation of listening to what everybody brought to the table, and I do appreciate it.
Maybe you can answer a couple of things?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Yeah, I'm sitting here and felt like I was in the first week of the class. It was great to hear all the perspectives, in particular Mira Mehta. I see her on the track field and her mother's photos and the New York Urban Debate meeting, if I remember it. So it was very impressive to hear her speak this evening. And, you know, I'm involved in the technology field, and when I look at things, I look at CNN and I look at Fox, and I look at both because I want both perspectives, and we heard a lot about perspective this evening. And I think CNN will present their point of view, and Fox will present their point of view, and we need to go as a U.S. citizen, if you will, or a member of the United States, go and look at everybody's perspective and get that opinion. And I think one of the things that's driving, or one of the areas that's, and I've been involved in research in, is social media. People are subscribing to Facebook feeds of their particular area of interest. I'm a Democrat, I'm going to look at all the Democratic things. I'm a Republican, I'm going to look at all the Republican things. And they're missing out on the perspective of the other side, regardless of where you stand or what you believe in. I think everyone in this room or at this table in this district need to look at the perspective of both sides. And when I grew up, I actually grew up in a very, I was the minority in the neighborhood I grew up in, and I lived there till 1984. And, you know, my father had many African American people that he worked with, And today, he's 91 years old and has an African-American caretaker who, he doesn't look at this person as white or black or anything. He's just looking at it as a person that's helping him out. And I think we all need to get that perspective regardless of who we are. And I think, you know, as far as like this course here today, I think I haven't reviewed all the materials. I think we got to look at the materials and just say, is there anything we need to adjust to put another a perspective from different angles on it, and make sure we're covering everybody's opinion on what we're talking about. And I think we need to get everybody's perspective when we're looking at this course, and it's important to have this type of course, but we need to make sure we're providing a balanced view from all perspectives. That's all.
I actually want to echo something that Michael said about perspective. The thing that struck me most about the conversation tonight was Mira's comment that that in some ways this course served to counterbalance an inherent bias that it already exists in a lot of our other history courses. That statement really struck me. And somebody, I think, asked, you know, like, how are our kids going to feel after they take this class? And to be quite honest, I'm not so worried about how my white Christian boy feels after he takes this class. I mean, I think that my hope is, I don't think he's that fragile. And I think that my hope is that what he walks away with is some perspective that his perspective is not the only one. And he doesn't have a lot of exposure to that in our district. That's just a reality as well. So personally, I mean, I think that we need to remember our role as a governing board, and that in terms of looking at the curriculum, that it has not been our custom, our practice, or our role to get into the weeds in terms of the reading materials. I think it's certainly appropriate for us to raise concerns if we have concerns about the reading materials, but it is not our role for us individually to go all back and sort of, we've hired experts to do that, and that's what they've done, and that's what they've presented to us. So I don't think we need to go back to the drawing board. So I think we should vote tonight, but I would caution us not to sort of suspend the vote, because we're going back to the drawing board to ask the experts to go back again to look at the reading list. I mean, I think Paul was very clear, this is the reading list that supports this curriculum.
And I agree, I appreciate all the comments, Gretchen, and I agree, I'm ready to vote at this point in time,
Just one comment. Listening to the 2 hours of debate about this understandably controversial course, I just wanted to sort of sum up with, you know, I consider myself, at least on the New Jersey scale, to be somewhat conservative. On the national scale, that puts me somewhere in the middle. But here, I'd be considered pretty conservative. But these complex conversations and the discussions that come from having those conversations never reinforces anybody's opinion. It moderates them. Nobody ever leaves a conversation where they feel uncomfortable saying, I'm more right now than I ever was. They understand they understand the other people's perspectives a little bit. It might not be enough to change their total outlook, but at least they understand a little bit more. And it's a real shame that racial issues have become such a partisan political issue, because it shuts down debate. You can't have conversations without it being automatically considered to be political. And that's really unfortunate, especially with what's going on a national scale.
Okay, are we ready to vote?
Michael Beeland.
I want to abstain until I review the materials.
Kent Diamond.
Yes.
Brendan Gallagher.
Yes.
Rob Garrison.
Yes.
Brian Morrissey.
Abstain.
Gretchen Oleg.
Yes.
Tara Porto.
Abstain until review materials.
Peggy Ouster.
Yes.
Amy Root.
Yes.
So I think that was 6:03?
Yes.
So we'll be on
6:03.
6:03.
603.
6:03.
603.
So it will be up for a second reading, again, at our December 3rd meeting.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out.
I just want to say one thing. I really appreciate everyone coming out here tonight. I know it's not easy to be recorded talking about these issues. And I really respect everything that everyone said, especially the ones who said them respectfully. I am really excited that you all came and that this course is something that is needed. And I just want to clarify my position, which was the same from the beginning, which was that I want it to be balanced as far as how the information is being presented to our students. That was really what the concern was. And in doing the research with what we were provided, it didn't appear that way to me or several other members of the community. So, you know, I feel terrible that some people, you know, are so angry that there are opposing views, and I really appreciate the people who respected that there are different opinions on this and that it's okay to have different opinions. That's what tolerance is. It's being respectful in the face of hearing different opinions. And you really, this group here all really did that, and I want to thank you.
I think to add to what you said, if I may, what I was doing when I reviewed this curriculum was I was looking at the learning objectives. I was looking at the essential questions and the guiding content questions for each unit in here. And there's a unit for Hispanic American critical race theory. There's a unit for Asian American critical race theory. And I was reconciling these questions back to the resources, the course resources. And I was wondering, I was left wondering to myself, how do we answer these questions based on the resources that are being, that the students are going to be referring to during this course? I was trying to understand how anti-Islamic sentiment was being covered in these resources. When I looked into these resources, I couldn't find anything in any of these resources with respect to anti-Islamic sentiment. That was my main reason for abstaining, is I wanted to see how, you know, I think some of these resources cover the African American experience, but I didn't see how these resources were covering the experience of an Asian American. So that was my rationale for abstaining.
Good. We'll move on to finance. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming out.
You're welcome to stay for the rest. We'll certainly understand.
We're missing a very big announcement. It's a great announcement.
Is
there an SD? I'd like the board to consider items 1 as always,
Do you know how much is left on that?
as always,
Do you
I'd
think
like
we'll make it to
to
the
call
end
out
of
a
the
couple of gifts that we received.
Yeah, thanks.
Number 6 is we accept a gift of folding tables, shelving, and various art supplies valued at $750 from Mr. Turritz to be used by the district. And I'd also like to accept a gift of a Concept 2 rower valued at $500 to $700 from Dr. Linda King to be used by the Health and Physical
Alex, are you reporting for the school? Are you reporting for the school?
I am.
You might just want to stay.
Okay.
Can you just
30
stay?
more seconds.
Listen, 30 more seconds.
Oh, is this like, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll finish with the Concept 2 rower that Dr. King donated to the health and physical education students at Westfield High School. I alluded to the fact that we have a very special gift, and I would like to turn it over to Dr. Dolan for her to speak of this gift that is being given to the district.
Yes, because I'm very excited about it, as is everyone in the district. So this particular donation has an interesting history. If you are a fan of Marvel, and even if you're not, you might want to pay attention to this. Kevin Feige is the president of Marvel Studios, known for its blockbuster superhero films including Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Black Panther, and of course, the Avengers series. Kevin is also a Westfield High School alumni, class of 1991. He delivered the commencement address to the class of 2013, and at that time, he toured his high school alma mater with his former teacher, Barbara Ball. The tour included a visit to the television studio, with Kevin remarking that the studio, in which he had spent many hours during his high school years, looked essentially the same. And he was right, little had been changed or updated since 1991. So earlier this year, as we finalized plans for a complete overhaul of the TV studio, we reached out to Kevin to ask whether he would be willing to contribute to the cost of the studio renovation project. What followed was several telephone conversations with Kevin's staff, and ultimately, with Kevin himself, who took great interest in the plans for the new TV studio. So tonight I am proud and very grateful to accept a donation of $500,000 from the Feige Family Trust to be used specifically for audio and video equipment for the TV studio. This generous donation will greatly enhance the new studio's technical and instructional capabilities. We so thank Kevin for his support and interest, and we congratulate him on his continuing tremendous success. And I will tell you, when we did have those phone conversations, well, we only had one with Kevin, to be fair. We had other ones with his people, but we had one with Kevin. But he wanted to hear directly from the teachers, what is it you want to be working on? What do you think is important for the students? And we're hoping in the future we are going to be able, he's a very busy man, but we can get him here. I know he wants to speak with some of our students, so we'll work on that as well. And we'd like to dedicate it at that point. So we'll continue to work on this, but we are so thankful that an alumnus reached out and was so generous to help our students. We're really very grateful.
Yes, and I thank our administration, because it wouldn't have happened without your work and your connections and you providing such a great education. He didn't get to where he is without having a great high school experience. So, yes, thank you again to Mr. Feige, and thank you to our staff. And you know, I do look forward to him possibly coming out and seeing our new TV studio, which was one of the places that we did see on our tour last week. So it's a wonderful thing. Thank you. We're all good?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, we're good. Technology.
Ready.
No, we voted.
Vote.
We got so much talking. I voted. I was trying to say, did we vote or did we vote?
Michael Beaver.
Sorry.
Yes.
Ken Diamond.
Yes.
Brendan Galligan.
Yes.
Robert Garrison.
Yes.
Brian Morrissey.
Yes.
Gretchen Olick. Yes. Tara Porto.
Yes.
Peggy Astor.
Yes.
Amy Root.
Yes.
Thank you. Michael, technology.
Sure, we had our meeting on October 18th, and Jean Gotko, who's our master technology teacher, provided an overview of to the camera. We are recording that information, and he confirmed that we can keyword search all of the calendars. So if we need to look for a particular name, so I don't want to use a name, but if we want to search for a particular person, we can across the board search that. The other area we looked at is the policy, from the policy perspective, board members and their role on social media. So we have an existing policy, and there's another policy we're looking at, the Strauss-Esme policy, and we're looking what do we want to incorporate from the Strauss-Esme policy into our policy. We started this a number of months ago. I'm waiting for some feedback from a couple of members, and I'm going to send it to Brendan for incorporating the meeting coming up next week. So hopefully we'll get it to them by next week so they can incorporate it into an updated policy. We don't expect that much change, but the policy, I believe, was last updated in 2013, and technology changed, and we have like Snapchat and things such as that, just to make sure we're incorporating changes from new technologies that come along. Our next meeting, and after that, is December 20th.
Thank you. I'd like the board to consider the notes for the record.
No, we don't have to consider them.
Just consider them.
We just consider them.
I'd like to be considered. Can I consider them in the morning? Okay, great. Moving on to unfinished business. Last board meeting, we had many people come to the podium to discuss different issues. And there were just two of them that I wanted to bring back to the table again, to let the public know that we are continuing to hear what they say, discuss it, and always consider it. And the two that I'd like to go back and discuss is our district efforts to combat hate and the graffiti in the schools. So I put some thoughts together, and I wanted to follow up on the concern of a resident who spoke at our last meeting, and that she basically said the district is not doing enough to address expressions of hate found on school property. The resident said that using morning announcements to speak to the issue is not enough, and we do agree. However, that is just one example of the many ongoing steps the district takes to combat acts of hate. As Dr. Dolan stated, we take this very seriously. The school district's role to educate our students about the impact of hate and the consequences of spreading it. For years, as required by law, the district has provided an age-appropriate program in K-12 curriculum that includes instruction in the Holocaust and genocide. The district also has supplemented that curriculum with powerful presentations by Holocaust survivors and their children, along with the assemblies and other opportunities to explore race and cultural diversity. This year, we were fortunate to be accepted into the Anti-Defamation League's No Place for Hate program. Working with the ADL, our high school and intermediate school administrators have scheduled additional educational opportunities to reinforce the message that hate has no place in our schools and our community. This includes an assembly at the high school planned months ago with a 30-year veteran of the law enforcement who will talk about bias, prejudice, and stereotypes. High school social studies teachers will then facilitate a discussion about the assembly in their classrooms. As always, the district makes it clear to our students that expressions of hate will be investigated and dealt with by local law enforcement. We continue to ask students and their parents to follow the public awareness campaign of See Something, Say Something, to report any acts of hate immediately to a building supervisor. So I just wanted to follow up on this resident's comments at our last meeting. We do take this seriously. It's not just about reacting to one incident. It's all-encompassing in our curriculum and in our daily activity and our daily work with the students. So, and it's planned long before a terrible act of vandalism occurs. So I just wanted to discuss that. And the other thing was the resident who came forth to discuss our lice policy. And once again, I just put some remarks together. Last week, we heard from a parent who requested that we take a look at a different policy for dealing with lice. This proposed policy was reviewed by the district's physician and our 13 school nurses who determined that it does not align with the guidance from the major national health associations. The policy that was presented was similar to what was in place years ago in schools, but is no longer considered an acceptable practice. The district physician, Dr. K, also reviewed the current district document, Management of Pediculous Lice, which is on the website for every school. She found it to be in agreement with the guidance from the Centers of Disease Control, the CDC, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the National Association of School Nurses, and there were many others. As pointed out by the New Jersey School Boards Association, it is an important role of school leaders to put personal perceptions aside and focus on making fact-based decisions in their mission to guide and oversee an educational program and environment that protects the health and welfare of all students. When head lice is diagnosed in our district, the child's parent and guardian will be notified and informed that proper treatment of this condition is in the best interest of the child. Some experts feel strongly that the alert letters to all parents in the class or the school violate privacy laws, cause unnecessary public alarm, and wrongfully reinforce the notion that head lice infestation indicates a failure on the school's part rather than a community problem. Over the last 10 years, multiple studies have proven the school rarely is the place of lice transmission. The vast majority of cases of lice are spread by friends and family members who often play and live together. Lice do not cause disease and are not dangerous to the child or to others. Our school nurses will continue to support with their school communities by providing education, training school staff, and assisting families whose child is found to have lice. We encourage parents and guardians to review the district's management of lice document found under the Health Services and under the Departments tab on the homepage of each of our school websites. So I just wanted to address the two things that were brought, or two of the things that were brought to our meeting, to let the public know that we do hear them, we listen, and this is a response for them. So I do want to kind of do that going forward, that if there are things that come to the board meeting that need further review, that we do that under unfinished business. Good. Okay, do we have any new business? Okay, any liaison reports?
Tomorrow night, the Union County School Boards Association is meeting in Garwood at the Westwood to discuss boardsmanship. Specifically, Gwen Thornton, our Union County Field Service rep, will be presenting roles and responsibilities of the board, how to be a better board member, how to be more effective in what we do. It's free for all board members. Dinner starts at 6, the presentation starts at 7.
And you have to have signed up for that in advance?
You can sign up really up through tomorrow, or show up and write your name on the list.
I know it's a little bit late notice, but I did want to make sure that everyone was aware of the fact that the next special ed PTC meeting is next Friday, November 22nd, from 9:30 to 11 at Farinolio's on Broad Street. It is not tomorrow. There was a notice that was out at one point that put November 13th as the date, but it is November 22nd.
Friday morning, right?
Friday morning, 22nd.
Right, when Farinolio is open, so, just to clarify. Yeah, okay.
Great. Thank you. This time I'd like to recognize the public for any questions or comments. Seeing nobody come to the podium. We will
Hey, can I
move.
just speak out of order for 1 second? I just wanted to make sure, I was homesick at last meeting, so I wanted to change my vote from a yay to an abstain on the minutes.
Okay.
And we're going to move into workshop upstairs where we will begin our discussions of the budget for the 2020-2021 school year.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Your high school students can go. We're excited about the fact that we got $500 million